I really encourage people, and I try and do this myself, to zoom out first, because I think that one of the big challenges, again, for people who want to be high performers, who are high performers, who want to be really physically fit, to be performing at work, to have great relationships, is we fall back into that trap of trying to do everything all the time. And so the tendency is, people say, James, tell me the perfect time to exercise every day, forever. And it's impossible, because what happens when kind of work gets really busy, or a kid gets sick, or you have to take your dog to the vets or whatever, well, what happens is life gets in the way every time. And as you described yourself, you have a perfect day, I'm crushing the world, and then it all falls apart and you just feel like you're a terrible person who just fails at everything. And it just creates this angst. And I've been there. I was there last week, actually. And so I encourage people to say, okay, this level of consistency is impossible. We've got to accept variation, and we've got to go back to that kind of periodized model. And so what I'll say to people is, you're always going to experience this peak, this valley, and this rebound. But what you do in that peak, valley, and rebound is going to change over time. And so with fitness, for example, we know that if you can synchronize your training with kind of the period of your day, it's often driven by circadian phase, but where kind of your body temperature is at its highest, particularly for strength training, you're going to lift heavier, you're going to move faster. And that's a great thing. The peak for physical training then might be the afternoon for some people. And it might be that you've got some difficult work projects that you've got a series of meetings at that time. Unfortunately, it's impossible. But what I'd encourage people to do is I look at their calendar in the long term and say, what do I need to emphasize at different points? So maybe exercise, you do feel at your best in the morning for exercise, but it's not possible all the time. Look at your calendar and say, okay, there's a period of time now where I've got 4 weeks after this really demanding project has come to an end, before the next one really starts to ramp up. I'm really going to focus on this 4 weeks of really putting a lot in the tank, really trying to build my physical fitness. So I'm going to choose to dedicate during this 4 weeks a portion of my peak time to physical training, to really try and build my physical fitness. There's another period of time where you might say it's going to be really demanding at work, and you've got a lot of deadlines, you're trying to finalize a project. You probably need to dedicate that peak time then to your cognitive work, and basically just fit physical exercise in whenever you can. And when you do fit it in, accept that it shouldn't be that intense, probably. Because what I often see kind of with high performers is, because we're trying to fit everything in all the time, often what we end up doing is massively overloading our sympathetic nervous system. We're basically completely overloading on stress, physical stress and mental stress. And the two are completely interlinked. You can't separate them out. We'd love to be able to separate our mind and our body. And I think, the Greek philosophy that informs a lot of our worldview in the West, I think lends itself to this kind of idea that we can separate them out, but we can't. And evidence has demonstrated in training, in sports science, that when we experience very high levels of stress, not only do we, psychological stress, not only do we not adapt as effectively to physical training, we're actually more at risk of injury at the same time. So I see all these people, and I do this myself sometimes, work incredibly hard in their working life, in their knowledge work, trying to still kind of, keep their fitness, and beating themselves up because, their session, they're not completing the workout of the day to the level and intensity they hoped. And they end every day just feeling like, I failed. I didn't quite get the work done that I wanted to. My training session was terrible. Like, now I can't sleep, and, it's going to kill me because, I read a book and my brain's going to start to melt away into Alzheimer's, when I'm 42. I just take a step back, just look at the big picture and just say, this block is going to have to be about work, but this block can be a bit more about my fitness. And day to day, think about how do you need to structure your time to prioritize that thing that matters most? So on average, if you look back at your kind of 12 months, you can say, on average, I tick the boxes 80% of the time. And that will mean over time, from year to year, you're going to start to work towards those goals. That is the path. So going back to that model that I described at the very beginning, where you start to say, where do I want to be? Be very clear about where you're starting now, which isn't going to be where you want to be. When you break down those steps to actually get there, you can't create a perfect routine that's going to be the same every day to achieve that. There's going to have to be phases with different emphases, which are going to reflect your priorities, what's most important at a given time. And I've found, personally, but also from people that I've worked with, that longer term view is quite liberating. because you're not just pursued by this continual sense of not being good enough. You actually recognize that you're going to achieve it, but it's going to take some time. And it creates a bit more margin, a bit more freedom as a result of that. So, I mean, hopefully that answers your question to some extent, but that's kind of how I'd think about it.